When it comes to the foundations of our bodies and the foundations of healing, one of the most basic foundations is that our body is built to move and that it must move. Every joint should move. We weren't given all these joints to just let them sit there and rot. And if you don't use it, you what? You lose it, right? So if we were supposed to be like just a brain on top of the stilts, that's what we would be. But we've got all these joints. So what we need is to try to focus on how do we move better and move well. Most of that is going to go back to our posture. Typically starts with our structure, and our structure is going to dictate our function. So if we're in a properly aligned position, our joints are going to move in a way that's efficient and effective and not wear out so much. But all of our bodies should move, and if we don't move those joints, we do start to lose them. So when we talk about ergonomics and posture today, we're trying to help you move better and move more often probably if you're at a desk or a phone, but also doing your work in the best position possible. So a couple things to start off with as we look at ergonomics. Now, ergonomics is a huge study that's probably gotten a lot more looks and understanding over the decades that I've been in practice. There's people that are hired to go to work and watch people and help them understand how to set up their desk and their computer. There's ones in industrial settings to help them lift better or stretch out before they do things. But ultimately today, what we're going to talk about is probably the day-to-day for most of us. Like, who doesn't have a phone? You probably use a phone significant points of the day. You probably have a computer. Most people are probably in front of something if they're working that's going to kind of help control where they're going and how to track things. So computers and phones are all the time. The way that we sit, the way that we stand are some of the most basic things we want to talk about first. So I will start with kind of the sitting and standing aspects of things. If you're seated, the first thing that we should always focus on, and I'll have you guys kind of like demonstrate for me here. You're on those postures, they're perfect. So I'm going to turn you guys around a little bit. So the ultimately, when people are seated, we want to make sure that, we'll show this guy because I'll use him as my model for town. Thank you guys. Is that when we go to sit in a chair, we want to make sure that your buttock is all the way in the back. So let's just take the posture disc out just for the moment. And when you go to sit in a chair, we want to make sure, we'll kind of use you on the side, that when you sit down, your buttock touches all the way to the back. So the first thing, go ahead and have a seat, is when you go to sit down, make sure that buttock touches all the way back here. Good. So when you're all the way back, your back is already supported by the chair, right? So most of us are going to sit down and go, sit on the edge. And then that allows us to slouch and hunch, because that's the posture we're trying to avoid, is that. So when we sit in a chair, we want to help that, make sure the chair is being used for its best potential and that your buttock's always there. Remember, there's like a bullseye right at the back of the chair. Anytime you sit down, aim for the bullseye. That's number one. Number two is making sure that you're stacked up well. And when you guys are sitting on a disc, you both look great. But basically your hip should be right below your shoulder. So, if we're really trying to get well, it'd probably maybe be up like this. So hip and shoulder in alignment, and then the shoulder and the ear would be in alignment. So we're just trying to sit tall, yeah. And the best thing that we can imagine when we're doing this is like there's a string at the top of the head, and it's pulling him upward, just like that, straight up. So yeah, if you want to imagine that string, and just not so much leaning backwards, but getting taller, yep, just like that. Just lengthening our spine. If you're lengthening your spine, you're going to be in a nice seated position, all right? So that's kind of ideal. So the next step is thinking about, okay, well, if that a seated posture is where the shoulder and the ear in alignment, so should the shoulder and the hip be in alignment when you're standing, and the hip should be right above the ankle. So most people kind of have a tendency, I'll try to get this and go away a little bit, have a tendency when they stand to kind of let their hips fly forward like this a little bit, and then usually that's naturally going to have your head here. When we get tired or focused in things, it's easy to kind of get here, right? And you could even sit, if you sit on the edge of the chair but lean back into the chair, you're going to be in that same kind of abnormal position. So very common, always make sure your buttoc's sitting in the chair, but if you're standing, making sure that your hips aren't just flying forward, because we'll talk about standing desks, but if you're standing in this position, that's still in bad posture, putting a lot of stress across your back and across your shoulders. Again, stand tall. Imagine that string is pulling you straight up. The hips come underneath the shoulders are over the hips are over the ankles, and the head is over top of that shoulder. And just the biggest thing with posture right now that I want to talk about is just the reminders. You need to develop habits that help you to remember at least every hour at the minimum to move differently, to get up, to stretch out, to get in that posture. So we're going to do something called a posture break. Now the posture break is something that would say is the way to reboot your posture every hour. Posture breaks are wonderful. So we're going to kind of sit here. I'll try to sit in a stool here. Let me go grab my stool. school. So posture break time. So posture breaks are number one way to kind of help reboot our system. And the way we're going to do that is when we're sitting in a stool or a chair, is if we've been kind of slouched or hunched, we don't want this forward position. His first step is, if you're not going to stand up, at least to get yourself all the way back to that chair and stand tall or sit tall. The next step is take your palms and just turn them upright. So you're kind of at a palm this way. Because the reason we're doing that is most people, when we're working, a phone or a computer, we're crunched forward. So our pecs get tighter and shorter, and then that kind of pulls your head and neck forward. So your head's going to follow that body. Your body will also follow your head. So first thing is palms out, shoulders back. So go ahead and roll your shoulders up and back and down, and then palms up. Good. You're going to hold that, and then you're going to extend your head, because most people's heads are way forward. This gets a curve in your neck. Remember, that curve absorbs shock. And at that point, you try to do 3 belly breaths. So you breathe in with the nose, hold in your abdomen, and then breathe out. Keep holding that extension. Close your eyes. Breathe in again and out. Last one. Breathe in and hold out. That's the posture break. If you've been sitting playing crossword puzzles or just looking at your phone on your couch, every hour you should set reminders. Some people wear bracelets, some people put stickers on their computer. They just do different things. They're called pattern interrupts, but something when you see it, you go, oh man, that reminds me, I gotta do this. So if you do work on your computer or your phone a lot, then you can set reminders to come up every hour. It says posture break. Because the biggest thing is not understanding this knowledge. It's pretty simple, but it's applying it to the day-to-day work. Posture break should happen every hour. That's probably the number one thing about trying to change, is that you have to mix it up. We have to do things differently with our muscles. We have to stimulate them differently. So good sitting and standing habits are important, but you need something to remind you to get back to those. Posture breaks, okay? That's probably number one big point, is posture breaks every hour. And this doesn't mean you have to be working at a computer. You could just be sitting around the house, or maybe you watch TV, but you gotta get up every hour, okay? And do that stretch. 30 seconds or so is 3 breaths. You do as many as you like. So sitting and standing posture, important. When your posture is properly engaged, your core is engaged, and that's why we like you guys to understand discs, because it does engage your core and stretches those out. Those discs are huge. Well, let's jump into kind of the next thing. So when we have a phone, very easy for us to go here and just kind of look down and, walk around. I've seen something, we do a talk called digital dementia. And digital dementia is where we see people start shortening their gait, acting like they have dementia based on the way they're carrying and holding their phones. So if you watch people walk around the sidewalk on their phones, it almost looks like a dementia walk, because your posture can affect so many things, which we're going to get into. But if you're carrying your phone, the first thing that you want to try to help yourself out with is that it should be outright. Chances are, if you're holding it out here straight where you have good posture, you're going to make sure, there's no way you're going to use it very long. I tell you that, number one. You're going to have to take those breaks. But holding it outright is key. If you have to be on your phone long term and you want to give a good stretch, you could always lay on your bed and do something like that, right? If you had to be on it. But if you're going to be on it, it really should be outright, right in front of your eyes. And this is where your computer really should be hitting too. We'll talk about that. But having a phone, it's going to be just out like this. Okay, it should be right in front of you. Here means I'm going to look down. For every 10 degrees that my head goes forward, it's like 15 pounds of pressure more on my spine. So something called tech neck, very common. And tech neck is where basically the head and shoulders, they stop lining up, and the further that the ear comes from the shoulder, the more pressure there is effectively from gravity. So if you guys have your posture pictures, if we've given them to you, say your effective head weight is whatever, and that's based on how forward the pictures were showing. So if my head was an inch forward, I'm probably carrying around 40 pounds of pressure on my spine. So if we look down at my phone long enough, I'm putting an extra 40 pounds of pressure for that long. Hold it up, okay? Hold it up. There's no research that says that being on your phone longer has helped save anyone's life or made it any longer or any better. So hold it there, and when you're tired, put it down. That's phone usage. It's one of the biggest things, is just avoiding that tech neck posture. The straighter your curve is in your neck, the less absorbing of shock it is, the more arthritis, tension, stress, headaches are all going to come from that. So phone posture should be out there. Okay. Computer would be in a similar way. I was going to try to kind of show you guys on that, but you guys can kind of imagine. I'll kind of show this picture to you guys on there, but you can see how that person's sitting. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but just try to make a mental snapshot there. Computer posture, very important. When you have a computer and you're in front of it 6 hours a day or more, one of the biggest things that you're going to see is that your computer and where it's positioned is going to affect you. First off, anything you're using often, a lot, should be right in front of you. Anything you're using often should be right in front of you. Somehow you're on the phone a ton, the phone should be right there. Shouldn't be over here. It shouldn't be on one side or another. You want that right in front of you. Computer usually is what's in front of you. So we want the main screen. I have so many people use multiple screens now because there's lots going on. If whatever screen that you're used to looking at the most, that should probably be the one in front of you. If you've got a dual screen, I can get that. You kind of have it split between the two. So maybe put the middle in the middle. That makes sense. But if there's one that you're using most often, that should be right in front of you. If I have so many people that they work in certain ways in which they're turned looking at something while they're on their computer. So when I go in the room to do their postural assessment, I'll have them close their eyes and I see like this. I was like, where do you work at? Do you look to your left? Oh yeah, that's where my whatever is. And so we see these things over time. Posture breaks would be very important in changing that, but obviously making sure that things you use most often are right in front of you. All right, number one. So make sure whatever you're using is right in front of you. Number two would be that I would suggest if you have a computer that you have the ability to stand at it and to sit at it. I think the recommendations, they're going to post this kind of whole worksheet that I've got. They're going to post it online so you guys know that you can get that. But a 3-to-1 would be the ideal ratio of standing to sitting. So standing 3 minutes to every 1 minute you're seated, right? Posture breaks are very important, but standing more than sitting. I've had plenty of people who got all gung-ho on their standing desk and they just went right to it all day. They were pretty sore. I mean, it's hard. So your body doesn't need breaks. That's important, but I would say more standing than sitting, and which would lead us back to, no matter how you're sitting or standing, following those posture guidelines. If I'm standing at my computer and I'm hunched over, or if I'm just kind of sliding forward here, we're getting bad posture. So we're making sure we maintain good upright posture. Very important for the overall sense of things. Seated posture at a computer would be the same thing we talked about. We went to head over shoulder, shoulder over hips, but what we want to talk about is kind of where your hands go. A lot of people, knowing and probably unknowingly, have a mouse that isn't necessarily right at that 90-90. We kind of want this 90-90 here. You want your mouse right about so that if you put your arms down relaxed and your elbow bends at 90 degrees, you would reach your mouse. Most people, especially if it's a job where it's not like you're just stuck all day long, their mouse is kind of like way up here. And even though they could kind of make it work and you don't notice it for the moment, you start getting tighter in your trap muscles. Your neck probably has even a tendency to tilt. I have a lot of people I see tilt their head to one direction. It's just kind of the way they think. But when your shoulders are out here, you're working your rotator cuff all day long. So they should be down here. So some people might have a nice little drawer that pulls out so it's right in alignment for them, or it's their desk is right at that height where they, if this was kind of for me, I would just be right on like that, right? Almost, so this could be a little higher, but you'd want that. So this is close. This is probably good. 90 to 110 degrees is fine, but you want your hands to be able to relax and right in that position. That's where your mouse should be. Shouldn't have to reach for it. When you're in this 90-90 position, is very also important that your arms and your hands are sitting, if you have a seat, if you're sitting in the seat, it should have the armrest where the armrests are like supporting your forearms. Does that make sense? So the armrest will be right on there. If you have a chair that doesn't have it, like for a stool or something, it's going to be easy to kind of get tired because you're having to hold them. If you have everything supported in that seated position, that's ideal. The more we go here, the more we here, the worse posture gets. And why is that even important? Well, actually, the research has shown us that the more forward flexed our posture is, the more you increase cortisol and other stressful chemicals, the slower information gets from your brain to your body. So you're almost in that fight or flight state, and information is not traveling as efficiently. So you can get foggy and less clear throughout the day just being in that poor posture. You're compressing your chest, your heart, and your lungs. You're not getting the oxygen in and up. So all that's like little stress throughout the day that builds up over time. Maybe it's decades for some people. Maybe it's weeks. But changing those postures is very, very important. And again, the posture breaks are still huge. Even if you're doing this all right, but you stay in that position all day long, it's gonna wear you out. So that's why we open, we get extended. You can stand and do it too. It's wonderful. Sometimes going for a walk, even for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, resets your brain, but it also resets your body, getting those things. I know some people you ever try was walking, there's like walking workstations. People get into those. I don't know if I could physically, I probably could. I guess I walk and work, but those are some tips on just how those computers should be aligned. Usually a rest for your wrists is helpful, like some sort of shock absorbing gel, some sort of a supportive surface like that. Keyboards can vary so much. There's so many, but ergonomically, it's wherever your hands are comfortable. Maybe it is like a little bit of a curved desk or that the keyboard's a little bit angled for your wrist, just slightly, so that it's not just straight flat. A little bit of an angle is helpful. Overuse injuries are going to happen when people are doing something often. A carpal tunnel can be that common. You could get tension in the forearms or the hands and fingers. Headaches will come back, neck tension just from being in those bad positions. But ultimately with a computer, the hands and wrists should be pretty much flat, bend at the elbow, and ultimately everything you're using is close to you. The screen itself, the screen's height itself has been debated in lots and lots back and forth, but I can tell you that if you go in COVID, when this happened, when people took their laptops home and sat on the couch, put the laptop on their lap and went here, that was like the worst thing possible, okay? We had so many people coming in during COVID just from getting switched from some sort of a decent station to work to home. But even at home, you really shouldn't be looking down at that computer much. You can even, if you have a laptop, you can buy a stand for it, and the stand would kind of prop it up like so that you can put it in a stand and then use a keyboard, a wireless keyboard. Okay, so a wireless keyboard can be very helpful. Your eyes should probably be hitting at least the top of the screen, if not the middle of it. So, if I'm on this station, really, that'd probably be right about like here. It'd probably look something like that. Nice thing about a laptop, if you have that little stand, you can make your laptop look kind of tall, right? But you want that so that your eyes are pretty much hitting the top to about the middle. That way we're not here, right? We're not here. So those screens do probably need to be higher for most people. That's what the ergonomics of screen position is all about. Those frequent posture breaks are very important. Like I said, every hour at least. These are just some of the essential things that kind of are listed out. I'll kind of list a couple. Integrate active workspace solutions. So you want to just make sure you're kind of active and you're working in those spaces. Place your computer at a desk where your monitor is about eye level. Wrist neutral, supported on the keyboard. Make sure that most common items are, again, within that arm's reach in front of you. That adequate clearance for a full range of motion in your workspace. If you get cramped up, you get tight, and you're going to get tight. Those are some of the big things with those things. I've also seen benefits with the feet and the legs. When you're seated, a lot of times things can get tight in your calves and your hamstrings, because if you sit a lot, your hamstrings get shorter, they shrink down, as well as the hip flexors here, those shrink down. So when I go to sit down, if I'm seated in a chair here, if you're seated, what happens to these muscles here when I sit down? They get shorter. My hamstrings back here, if I was standing, they'd be this long. When I sit, they get shorter. So our hamstrings get short, and these get short, and that usually takes people into these spaces like this, because these are short. This is why we work a lot of those hip flexor exercises for a lot of people, because they're so short, and hamstring exercises. We talk about just simply kind of getting that down and stretching those out. We test your guys' flexibility. But when you're seated, those muscles always get short, and they can definitely get tight. Now the calf muscles can get tight as well. We do suggest an angled foot support, so that instead of your foot being flat on the ground, you put it like on a little angle, a board or something. You can kind of keep it in an angle, just so it'd be like this. And that usually kind of stretches your calves out and gives you a little bit of support too. You can buy them probably, but you just need something that's a little bit of an angle that you can put down there. Even a box to put them on. So you put your toe on the box and your heel down on the ground. Again, we're gonna put this guide online. You guys will see that as a resource. Hopefully we put it out even when we do our next email maybe. But you guys can have access to that. Look at some of those pictures and refer back to this. Okay, thanks for being here. Have a good night. See you, everybody.